And of course, we do have visuals that we're going to play out throughout the interview for you to see just how serious the situation has gotten in France. And this was after a Muslim teenager was shot dead by a policeman. Now, the grandmother of the teenager shot dead by the police during a traffic stop in a Paris suburb said on Sunday that she wanted the nationwide rioting triggered by his killing to end after a couple of nights of unrest in France. Morning to you, Clotilde Bigot. Lovely to have you on the show. I believe that you do work in Lebanon, but you are currently in France. Just give us a bit of background there. Morning and welcome.
So I'm sorry, there was a tiny connection issue. I didn't get the question. Apologies.
Okay. You are currently in France, but you did
Yes.
tell me off air that you are based in Lebanon. So are you French? Are you a French citizen working from Lebanon? Just give us the background there.
Okay, so yes, I'm a French citizen and I've been living in Lebanon for around 6 years now. And I go back and forth to France because it's not that far away pretty often. And I just got back a few days ago and I'm planning on really trying to soak in all these riots going on and checking that out in the next couple of days.
Now, you are not Muslim at all, but we do know that there's a very big Muslim migrant community in France and in the rest of Europe. We also know there's this narrative of Islamophobia that plays out from time to time in different countries in Europe, even in the United Kingdom. Just recently, once again, the stupidity of the burning of a Quran in Sweden. Um, we come back to France because that's what we want to focus on, and the issue around this teenager that was shot dead. We also hear now that the police said that it was not his intention to kill him. We don't know how that played out, why the policeman shot at this teenager at almost point blank range. Um, but it has created unprecedented unrest in France. How do you, as a non Muslim and a young person yourself, view what is playing out right now in France?
Well, I see this as it's for me, it's very clear. We had unrests in 2005 following the death of two young boys in the Persian suburbs. And this is kind of the same thing. What we hear is that the youth, especially the immigrants that came, they're now second or third generation, so they're fully French. But those who live in the Persian suburbs, and France has kind of ghettoized the suburbs. So basically, the poor people will stay over there, that migrant population will stay over there, and then we have the houses next door. So it's this kind of ghetto situation that created some places in the Persian suburbs or even in Paris where many people are just the majority of the population is very poor and it's underfunded. And so there's this feeling that the Republic has kind of forgotten about them. And you have to add that to police violence, which is very strong in France, especially in these neighborhoods, because the majority, the system of the French police is racist. This is something that the UN has called out. And you add all this frustration, the fact that it's harder to get a job because of day-to-day racism or the fact that you live so far away, and there's all these things. So the poorest neighborhoods and the fact that the police constantly harassing these youths, this creates a massive frustration. And the fact that this young boy, Nael, was killed at point blank, actually, the videos show that the gun was maybe a meter away from his head. That was really the straw that broke the camel's back, basically.
Absolutely. Now, we talk about these migrant communities living in almost ghetto like conditions. This seems to be the powder keg that was about to explode, and it has in fact happened. However, we also hear that the grandmother of the teenager that was killed, Nahel, has asked for calm. She's asked for the rioting to stop. She has said that this is not going to bring back her grandson. His mother is absolutely devastated, suggesting that her life is so totally empty without him being around. She doesn't know how she is going to, in fact, move on. Let's understand how the French authorities are responding to those comments by the family. And do you think that at this point they're going to firstly give support the family by, giving some form of reparation? And how do you believe the rest of the situation is going to be addressed by the French authorities? Undoubtedly, Macron has lost a lot of support. He's not being viewed at all in a positive light, is he? So, lots
No,
of questions to you.
Macron is not viewed in a positive light at all. This has been a moment ever since the retirement reform that he made a few months ago, where there was massive protests in France too. To go back to the family of Nael, they have explicitly stated that they want these riots to stop, but now it's much bigger than them, actually. This is not about Nael anymore. It was about him at the beginning, but now it's just about the police, the French police, the authorities. And so we have the far right kind of putting oil on the fire and trying to stir up anger towards these protesters and these rioters because there are lootings, because there's a lot of violence. And then we have the left that refuses to condemn these violence and that says that it just wants justice. And speaking of justice, the police officer that killed Nael, he is in jail right now. He was convicted for murder, and this is something that was supposed to calm kind of everybody down, like, oh, look, justice is being served. But we see the far right in France trying to use that, just saying that he was just doing his job, which, according to the law, we have a self-defense law in France for police officers where they can use their weapon in certain circumstances, and these were not these circumstances. So it wasn't about self-defense. So we have these kind of two blocks of politics. We have the left and the right, both playing their part, but lots of people are afraid that this is going to benefit the far right. There's actually a fundraiser online that was made by one of the top far right figures, and more than 600,000 euros have been donated to the police officer's family. Lots of people are asking for that fundraiser to be taken down. So the authorities are, especially Macron, he started, because this has been the fifth night and now it's calming down. But at the beginning, Macron started just, he didn't really say anything. He didn't really do anything. He just said that it was unforgivable what the police officer did. And then as the riots got worse and worse, he kind of took a step back, but was still present. He canceled a visit to Germany. And but the rest of the government is trying to be on the ground and trying to show that they're present, but it's already too late.
Um, how do you believe this is going to now play out? Macron has indicated that the police officer was wrong, hoping that that would quell all the violence. Undoubtedly, there's a lot of criminal elements involved in the violence now. There's been lots of looting and damage to infrastructure, which probably runs into the millions. What's going to what needs to happen for common sense to prevail? And I should imagine lots has to happen because it's now about the situation of the migrant communities. They are in a position of power in wanting their situations to change. As you've indicated, they're living in ghetto-like conditions. There's the issue around unemployment, social services possibly not servicing them as they should be serviced, etc. So there's a whole host of social elements involved here. It's not an overnight fix, but what type of promises do you believe needs to be made by government for all of this to be addressed?
Well, this is it. This is the whole issue with these riots, is that these riots are very violent and they're happening right now. And in order to make them stop, we cannot have an overnight fix. So Personally, I think that the first issue that needs to be addressed is the police. The police system in France is very racist. And again, I'm quoting the United Nations. And this humiliation, basically, the police in France like to humiliate some of the youth. And this is something that needs to be restarted from the bottom up, and there really needs to be a serious change. These past years, with our different ministers of interior, the police has had much more rights, and lots of people feel like there is abuse, where there is just constant arrests and just global violence against very random people, including myself as a journalist. And so this is number one. After, obviously, there needs to be a change of architecture of the way that we think cities, and the way that we put, like, we just put people where they are. And this is a very strange thing in France, but this is something pretty common elsewhere too. It's just very complicated to do that as an overnight fix, and it costs a lot of money. And this is something we have to rethink. We have to just basically rethink all of our city structure.
Okay, Clotilde, we're going to go for an ad break. We'll get back to you and continue this discussion. Please do stand by.
Salam Media.
لا تقل لوحدي أو كيف السبيل.
Humanity sets the agenda.
There's no smell that takes me back to the comfort of my childhood than the smell of blackseed oil being applied by my nanny. Now I'm using tib blackseed in my own home to soothe sniffles and coughs, to help with digestion and immunity, and of course, as part of my beauty routine. After all these years, I've come to appreciate the wisdom in finding comfort and shifa in trusted treatments like tib blackseed. You can find tib blackseed at all leading pharmacies, or find out more at blackseed.co.za.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Conveniently located along the banks of the Crocodile River bordering the Kruger National Park, as a guest at Buckler's Africa Lodge, one can enjoy an amazing sunrise or sunset on our spacious deck area while you catch a glimpse of some wildlife sightings along the Crocodile River. The sounds of the African savannah will greet you whilst you enjoy your morning coffee. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection. Buckler's Africa Lodge is ideally situated only 6 kilometers from the Crocodile Bridge Gate in the Kruger National Park. Catering for all travelers with variety, we have 4 types of the finest rooms: superior rooms, deluxe suites, and 2-bedroomed family units. Each room is equipped with the finest amenities to make your stay unforgettable. Guests can choose between the self-catering option or book their accommodation with breakfast and dinner included. Buckler's Africa Lodge is your ideal location for the ultimate Kruger getaway experience. We specialize in exhilarating and educational game drives in Kruger, tailor-made to suit your family. Inquire about our various accommodation offerings and other activities. Visit www.tingana.co.za for more information. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection. Experience the pulse of Africa with us.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning, or for that late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating, and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, Now We Cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media.
لا تقل لي وحدي أو كيف السبيل.
Humanity sets the agenda.
It's 8:21 a.m. South African time. We cross over to France. We are talking with a freelance journalist. She's Clotilde Bigot. She's talking to us about, obviously, France has fallen, the shooting of a Muslim teenager by a police officer. And of course, that has, the reaction has been absolutely unimaginable. Everyone, the left and the right political arms are hoping and praying that this will end shortly and be resolved, but lots and lots of damage control needs to be done, and lots of, I should imagine, promises made to the migrant communities in France. Welcome back, Clotilde, and let's look at the issue around
I'm here.
Okay, great. It's exactly 22 after 8 o'clock. Welcome back. We cross over back to France to freelance journalist, and that, of course, is Clotilde Bigot. She's based in Lebanon, has been for the past 6 years, but she is a French citizen. Back in France for a short while, and she's here to talk to us about the unrest that has unfolded in France after the shooting of a teenager. I think he's only 17 years old, a Muslim teenager from a migrant community, and that was he was shot dead by a policeman. And we do know that the country is deeply, deeply divided racially, as is, I should imagine, the rest of Europe and possibly the rest of the world. Welcome back, Clotilde. Okay, let's look at the issue around this unrest. Doesn't bode well at all for France's image just a year before the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. How's that going to play out?
Well, it's a very important thing to mention because some of the infrastructures of the 2024 Olympics were burnt. And we've been also talking before this unrest, we've been talking about the public transportation situation, because in Paris it has gotten worse and there's lots of canceled trains, canceled metros, and people are just joking about the fact that, like, oh, Paris 2024 is going to be a lot of fun now that it's just the Parisians taking the metro and it's already like overcrowded. How are we gonna have millions of people in Paris? But this creates an image. So we have to realize that these unrests, they are widespread in many, many cities in France, but life goes on completely normally. And it doesn't pose a threat to tourists or to anyone visiting Paris. There has been a bus of Chinese tourists that was a bit damaged, but these are very small incidents and they're very localized. You just have to be careful at a certain time of night and just check the news where the protests are. Oh, maybe I won't go to the Champs-Élysées tonight because there's going to be protests. But this does give a really bad image, and this also gives a bad image of Emmanuel Macron, the president, where he can't really contain his people in a way. And this is a very bad image abroad for all the people who are looking forward to the Olympics. And it's actually very, well, for a lot of French people, it's quite funny because we're talking about France really, they were so proud and they were very happy and they put a lot of strength into the Olympics, and we have a lot of lot of issues coming out with the Olympics. There's these undocumented migrants that were working without a contract, building infrastructures for the Olympics that came ahead and just said, like, this is happening, this is illegal. We have this unrest with a lot of infrastructures that were burned down, and we have the whole public transportation situation. So these Olympics are seen as something that, like, okay, we'll see how that goes for now, like a day by day, but this may be very chaotic.
Absolutely. And France, as other countries as well, do depend to a large extent on their tourism industry as well. And you mentioned the Chinese. I understand that China's consulate has lodged a formal complaint after a bus carrying a Chinese tour group had its windows smashed. This was on Thursday, leading to minor injuries. And China, along with other Western nations, have warned their citizens to be vigilant due to the unrest, which could pose a significant challenge for France in the peak summer tourism season, which I should imagine is that's where we're at right now. And that also begs the question what's going to happen regarding the Olympics. You have answered part of that question. Do you believe they very concerned, and how can they do damage control regarding tourism?
Well, I don't think the government has a lot of impact on this issue. I do believe that tourists, for example, the main tourists who come to France is generally Asia, with China being a big part, and also the U.S. And like Americans who organize their trips generally, and also the Chinese, because it's so far away, they don't simply come to Paris. There's a whole like kind of Euro tour where they go to Paris and then they go to Italy or Switzerland. And so it's kind of something that they can't really cancel in a way. So I don't think it will have an impact on tourism in France this summer. And the issue is when we're talking about like the president or the prime minister, whatever they say, first of all, it's the French president. We're not expecting him to say, don't come to my country, be careful, it's dangerous. So I don't think he would be taken very, very seriously if he tells people like, don't worry, welcome, you can come to France, there's no issue here. And it would also, I'm pretty sure, reignite the riots, because this is basically dismissing what's happening, and that would not be a good look on Macron. But when it comes to tourism, I do think it depends on the populations. But for example, the Americans who come over in Europe for tourism, I don't think they'll be very impacted. And also because there's a certain not similarity, but in the US there has been some rioting and some lootings and mostly shootings, but these are things where they know to what extent it's safe or not. And then the Chinese, when it's more organized groups, maybe there will be some cancellations. But for now, I can't really say, but I do know that whatever the French government says, it's not going to have a real impact.
And I think this is reminiscent of two incidents: the Black Lives Matter issue in the States. I think that story went all around the world, as is this story, is going to stick in people's minds. And I know that it's really very far removed, but I was thinking about the Arab Spring, how that started, also with a teenager writing some graffiti on the wall. And just look where we are now, as regards that issue. And it's been playing in my mind all the time. And the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States. Something has to happen, and something radically positive has to happen within the migrant communities by government for this to be contained. Otherwise, we're going to see unprecedented damage, I think, emotionally, mentally, and physically in France. What are your thoughts around all of these issues?
Well, first of all, the link between the Arab Spring and these riots is easy to make, but I don't think Zira can be compared to Paris and Bashar al-Assad to Macron.
Of course.
Although
I just mentioned that because we realized how a very innocent, really innocent act by a teenager just went totally out of control and change the world as we know it.
100%. This movement is very close to Black Lives Matter. Actually, when Black Lives Matter protests happened in the U.S., I think it was around 2020. It was right after the lockdown. We had some similar protests in France, especially because there was a former man, a black man, killed by the police, and so his family was there, and there was a lot of support to his family. And but what we see today is, well, this is a new generation. This is a TikTok generation. This is Gen Z. 30% of the people that were arrested by the police during these protests were under 18. So we're talking about something completely new that we weren't expecting. And these groups are just either group of friends that just go out just kind of to have fun in a way, to kind of participate in what's happening right now. And we also have more organized groups. We have, for example, in France, what we call the Black Blocs, and they're present at every protest, and they're very, very organized. They're all dressed the same. Their faces are hidden. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're just very radical, basically anarchists. But what we see today is new, and I think this is why the government is struggling, and this is why Macron has called on the parents' responsibility to basically keep their children on track, because we're talking about children. We're talking about very, very young adults. And this is new Gen Z kind of thing. Everything's on TikTok, everything is on Snapchat, and the government is kind of struggling to have this basically Gen Z boomer conversation. And this is why it's not stopping.
Okay, so to wrap up now, we also have heard about an incident where a mayor's house was targeted and attacked whilst his family was sleeping. That, of course, does bolster the right wing, doesn't it? Because they kind of will use it to their advantage. That's the first part of my statement. And to wrap up, then, what needs to happen for the violence to be quelled? What sort of promises should Macron be making to migrant communities? And what sort of gestures should he be making to this particular family in terms of reparation for their loss? No amount of money can bring back a life. I would never want to be in a situation like that, but reparation does need to happen. And I think more importantly, the migrant community's frustrations need to be addressed. Otherwise, this is just going to continue, is it not?
Yes, 100%. If I go back to the mayor's house, it's the mayor of a city called Les Roses in the Parisian suburbs, a bit further than Nanterre, where the shooting took place. What happened was actually the mayor was at the mayor's office, so he wasn't home, but his wife and children were, and they're looking for 3 to 4 suspects right now as we're talking, and this is an attempted murder case. It's not just a simple looting or rioting. We're talking about attempted murder, and some mayors have called French people to today go at 1 p.m. in front of all the mayor offices in France to show support to their mayor. So we'll see how that plays out. And more generally, for these riots to stop, actually, some riots, last night it was much less violent than the nights before. We're talking about 70 people who got arrested, whereas before it was about 700. So it has dialed down, and many people say that it has dialed down because there's nothing to burn, there's nothing to loot anymore. And so
Sure.
we have some neighborhoods where, well, all the bus stops are broken. So what is there to break? But also, I think it's just people are getting tired. Parents are taking their responsibility, if I can say it like this. But basically, some parents are imposing a curfew on their children, and they're being stricter and stricter. So I think it's also just dying down because these things die down anyways. And for what the French government has to do is extremely wide. We have a police system that is systemically racist, and this is something that needs to be addressed. And this the police officers in France can basically do a lot of things without any issue. And so this is a counterexample, thank God, because there's an actual case, and the police officer that shot Nail dead is now in jail. But this is a deeper issue. This is a much deeper issue. We're talking about police violence. We're talking about systemic racism. We're talking about all these communities that live in the suburbs of Paris who basically just need to stay there kind of far away. And this plays into the whole left-right situation. It plays into the racism because it's a vicious circle. You put people in poverty, you don't let them thrive, and then you wonder why they go into drugs as a way of making money. Basically, it's very basic. But and to the family of Nael, I believe that Macron, I don't know if he is called to the mother, but is generally what is done. So he should definitely meet the family and just kind of acknowledge the pain that they're going through and acknowledge that he has a part in that pain. I think that's more important than money, although money, it's a principle. You have to give financial support anyways, but that's not the issue. That's not the hardest thing. Just giving money is very easy for a government, but being present and showing actual support, that's what I think is the most important.
And I think as I wrap up, obviously the deeper issue, as you alluded to, is the systemic racism, the poverty, the migrant communities being marginalized, possibly to the point where even the education that their children are receiving is not of the same standard that white French children receive, and the issue around employment. If all of those issues are addressed, things will start changing. And that's not only a story that relates to France. This is a migrant community story all around the world. But Clotilde, that is where we'll leave it. Lovely talking with you. Thank you indeed. God bless and stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
That was Clotilde Bigot. She's a freelance journalist based in Lebanon, but she's a French citizen visiting France currently, talking to us about the killing of the Muslim 17-year-old boy by a police officer in France. And we have seen the horror that unfolded in the French suburbs regarding all of these issues. Do stay with us. It is exactly 8:38 a.m. In a minute or two, we'll be joined by Tariq Jenkins. He is the chairperson of a Zara Restorative Justice Forum.